I want to welcome everyone to our insight session for night 3 of our virtual district conference for the Pacific Southwest District. My name is Lauren Saganos Cohen. I am your Zoom host this evening, so that means I'm taking care of all of the technical issues, letting you in from the waiting room, muting you if your background noise is too loud, things like that. So just a few Zoom housekeeping details. If you haven't found that the mute button, this would be a good time to find it. It helps when you're not speaking, which will be the majority of the time when David is speaking. It helps to cut down on that background noise. I see that a lot of you have your mute button already. If you're on a computer, it's on the bottom left. And if you're on an iPad, I think it's also on the bottom left, or you swipe to find it. You can also switch your view. On your computer, there's a view button at the top right. And if you would like for your computer to focus on who is speaking, it's called speaker view, and that will highlight David while he's speaking. Or if you'd like to see the faces of the rest of the attendees while you listen, you can click the gallery option. Okay, I think we are ready to go. David, I'm going to pass it off to you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be with you all. And I was saying to Lauren a little bit ago, when we're having Mission and Ministry Board meetings, we bring her out sometimes pretty early in the morning to accommodate the East Coast schedules. I'm accommodating your schedule. It's nearly my bedtime tonight, so I'll try and keep my eyes awake. And if not, Lauren can mute me if she doesn't like what I'm saying. I want to acknowledge that Lauren is a Mission and Ministry Board member, and we're delighted to have she and Thomas from your district serving on the board as well. And also want to acknowledge Shannon McNeil, who is in the gallery here this evening, who is a denominational staff member. She's a mission advancement advocate for us. And so I'm glad she's listening in as well. I think tonight I'd like our time to be somewhat conversational and give you opportunities to ask some questions. I'm going to share just a few things with you. I will put up a PowerPoint just as a visual aid and talk about a few things with you, and then we'll see if you have questions about anything I've either presented or talked about, or whatever else is on your mind regarding the church. And so we'll work at it in a conversational kind of a mode this evening. So, but as we gather, just take a moment and gather together with a word of prayer. Oh God, we offer our thanks for the bounties and blessings of this day, mindful of all that's going on around the world and in our local communities. And we pray that we may find ways to be your vessel of healing, of caring, of reaching out, offering the cup of cold water. As we gather here this evening, we pray your blessing upon this time. And we pray that as we converse together, that we sense your spirit in our midst. Oh God, for we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, let me give this a whirl here. You're seeing my screen or the PowerPoint? Okay, great. Well, since March, since the recognition that COVID was really becoming pretty significant, when the governors of Illinois, in our case, and Maryland began to close non-essential businesses, I closed the general offices in the Brethren Service Center, and we moved very quickly the next couple of weeks out into remote work settings. And that has been the way we have been functioning since that time. Just today, I extended the building closures through March of next year, and really trying to accommodate the needs of our staff and their well-being as we continue our work on behalf of the church. I think much like the rest of the world these days, we spend a lot of time meeting by Zoom, obviously. And one of the ways we've been trying to stay connected as staff, not only through team meetings, but once a week, each Wednesday, we gather for an all-staff meeting. And we've been passing the devotional opening around to each of our staff members. And so it's a way of connecting with one another, just having an opportunity to hear what staff are working at, or what some of their what's going on in some of their lives, things that they want to share with the staff. And some weeks that's a 15 or 20-minute meeting, and other weeks it could be up to a 40-minute meeting. But that is the way we've been gathering, obviously, and we continue to try to assess the needs of the church as best we can. And there were a number of insights or workshops, online workshops that we worked with. Some we partnered with Bethany along the way. And one of the things we worked at early on was trying to assess what were some of the more immediate needs. And in doing that, we began to think about some of the finances and resources we had available at the time. We have a Brother in Faith and Action Fund, which was part of the proceeds from the sale of the Brethren Service Center a couple of years ago. And these were money set aside for grants for congregations in the spirit of carrying on the legacy of the Brethren Service Center, primarily for outreach ministries in their community. And so we stepped that up and recognized that our church camps also were needing some help along the way. So the board quickly approved, the board approved changing the parameters of the Brother in Faith and Action Fund for this year to open up the ability for camps to apply for grants. The Emergency Disaster Fund, which is one that we've drawn on for disasters over the years. We also set some monies aside for local churches to support any humanitarian efforts that they were working at in their communities, as well as providing COVID relief grants to our global partners around the world. We also identified some monies from a fund that we had for, the health fund that we have, in which we were able to set aside $500,000 and disperse to 21 member retirement communities. So you can see the totals that we've given. We've given almost $1 million to support congregations and camps and our global partners in our retirement communities as we've all been living into this COVID time. And actually, since this slide was prepared, we've given more, and we're nearing $1 million in what we've given to date. And so we moved on these pretty quickly at the start of COVID. We also have been, last December, I received the resignation of Jay Whitmire, long-time Global Mission Executive Director. And he basically had been stuck by a needle so many times because of all his travel and all the vaccinations. Literally, he said, "I'm just tired of being stuck." And some other things going on for him, his family wanting him to be home. So Norm and Carol Waggy have been serving as interim directors and have been connecting with our mission partners around the world. In fact, we just had a Zoom meeting with a number of our global mission partners yesterday, just sharing prayer concerns from their settings as well as ours. one of the things Norman Carroll and I have worked at was how do we begin to move our mission, global mission responsibilities into the larger church, rather than laying the burden totally on staff. We have a number of people stateside who have passions for our missions. And so Norman Carroll came up with this idea of country advisory teams. And they're a way of connecting a person of passion, so to speak, somebody from the States with somebody in country, as a way to keep the communication lines open between our country and theirs. And as we also move into this global, this new global mission philosophy, which we are no longer seen as the parent, so to speak, but we're an equal partner with the emerging churches around, Church of the Brethren around the world. All that said, we are in the process of interviews with candidates for the global mission position. And we are in fact having a second round of interviews with a group of candidates within the next 2 weeks. So we're really excited about those conversations and the possibilities of what comes with that. As you likely have seen in Newsline, much to our disappointment, we've made the decision to move NOAC to a virtual event next year. And just recognizing still enough uncertainty about the virus, and as well as the timing of that. And so in order to move ahead with planning, NOAC has made the decision to go virtual. Not in my parameter, but as you've also seen, the annual conference is also looking at a hybrid model for next summer as well. More recently, our denominational work camps, they've been doing some extensive research, inquiring out with people who've been connected with work camps over the years. And they have renamed the work camps to Faith Outreach Expeditions, or FaithX. They too are looking at a different model for next year in terms of the traditional work camps, and trying to develop a more regional possibility for those to eliminate travel and really tap into youth in local regions and local congregations. More recently, the staff are working at a leadership summit on well-being for April 2021. This was in Newsline as well. The keynote presentation will be by clinical psychologist and professor Dr. Jessica Young Brown of Virginia Union Universities. And so she will be on tap for that, and that is just in the early stages of planning. Just a little tidbit of information. The board made some decisions as they were looking at stewardship issues related to property, and the old BVS house over near Highland Avenue Church made the decision that it was time to sell that house. And I know a number of people were not pleased with that decision, but we felt that spending $150,000 to try and fix it up was not in our best interest and good stewardship practices. And so we bought a house near the general offices, and that's what this picture represents. The house is up in the right-hand corner. It's pointing to the location and proximity to the offices, which is up in your left-hand corner. And the property, that area of trees, that is all property owned by the Church of the Brethren. So this house is just adjacent to our property. The board also made a decision related to stewardship of property. We own a approximately 24-acre parcel here. And the board also made a decision to sell. Oh, this is the house that's for sale, the old BVS house. And so if anybody's interested in a house in Elgin, we'd be glad to talk with you. Actually, we just signed a contract this week with a potential buyer. And so we're pretty excited about that possibility. we are coming back to the property, the 24 acres. We also have about 12 acres on the back end of this for sale as well. It's for a lot of years it was in community gardens, but we felt that it was time to let go of it. So it's been on the market about a year now. This last summer, the board called out a strategic design committee to begin to frame and bring a recommendation of a new strategic plan to the board. They called the committee out in March of this year, and that committee, which included Lauren as a board member, and actually your district executive, Russ Madison, that design team brought this strategic plan to our board for approval in July, in which they did approve. And these are just the 4 background visions. The plan is based on actually the compelling vision that's not yet been approved by annual conference. But given the investment that we've made in terms of conversations across the denomination, we felt pretty strongly that it was the best representation the compelling vision was of the voice of the church. And so this plan, these 4 strategies is what the board is really just beginning to step into and understand what these mean. But as you can see, again, living out of the compelling vision, pursuing Christ's call to discipleship, embodying the biblical command to love our neighbors, seeking God's racial justice, and reclaiming the New Testament models of giving. These 4 strategies are the basis of the plan in which we will be, as the board will be engaging in the next couple of weeks to have some more generative conversations around, and then the staff will pick up and begin to frame our ministries around. That in a nutshell, friends, is what I wanted to share tonight. There's more that I could share. I trust that you've been following Newsline and Messenger, but I really wanted to give you opportunity to ask questions. Any questions you have about the ministries that we're working at or things going on, life in the denomination. So I will look to you to raise your questions.
And you can ask your questions in one of 2 ways. You can use the chat feature, which at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says chat with a little speech bubble. And you can type in your question, and David can read that, or I can read that, and we can respond in that way. Or you can unmute yourself and ask your question that way.
Hey, David, what's the status of Brethren Press?
What's the status of Brethren Press? Brethren Press has had a pretty tough year regarding COVID, and we have been doing some assessment about how to move ahead with Brethren Press. I'm committed, and the board is committed to continue on. We believe there's value in what Brethren Press does in terms of Sunday school curriculum and resources to pass on not only the Brethren values, but our Anabaptist and Pietist heritage, to tell our stories. But we're now, the executive committee actually is in the process of calling out a team to reimagine Brethren Press, and recognizing a lot of the changes that are happening around us. And so we really want to take some time to reimagine what Brethren Press might look like for us as we live in this new day. But I would say that we're pretty committed to continuing those ministries. We did we did see, we've not had a clear picture of how significant the COVID impact has been, but as of the October board meeting, we were nearing for this year almost $100,000 worth of additional debt in terms of Brethren Press, and so we're pretty concerned about that. Although we did have a generous gift from an individual to help offset that. But does that answer your question, John?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Question over here.
Oh, go ahead, Robert.
Okay. Hi, David. Robert from Glendale Church of the Brethren. Our church has been, hit pretty hard financially with the shutdown. We relied a lot on renters. We had a preschool, giving us, income for their space, and so we went through our savings. We reopened for a month and then shut back down. And on the one hand, we are very much, concerned with. We don't want to spread, and we want to open up when it's safe, but at the same time, we're also equally concerned with our future. So we rely on that rental income, and we've taken out a loan through the district, but that loan will be gone in about a month and a half, and we don't think it's wise to keep taking loans out. We just really need to reopen. So we're kind of, and we've continued to work, and we've focused on worship, and we stayed active. It's just we're in a hard spot because we relied so much on that rental income. And even if the church doesn't pay me a salary, we can't survive without the rental income. And so we're in a difficult position. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for us. We don't want to keep taking loans out from the district. So we're in a tough position.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear the impact that this is having on in your congregation. I'm not sure I have any real good advice to you. I think it's a challenge for all of us in lots of different ways. I don't know what kind of grants there may be out, if you've explored that possibility. I'm not sure. You've taken loans from the district. I was a district executive at one point, and I don't know where the district is in terms of providing ideas. I'm not saying providing resources, but are there ways that you can mutually support one another? And so I wish I had a way to better answer your question, Robert, but it's quite a challenge.
David,
sorry about that.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a couple questions in the chat, some of which are public and some of which were sent to me privately. So I'll try to ask them in the order in which I've seen them. One person wonders, do you consider weekly local worship services to be essential? And I don't know if you want to ask some more clarification on that or just interpret that how you want to.
Do I consider weekly worship services essential? I do. As a pastor, starting out as a pastor, I always found that gathering once a week was significant. I think we're seeing lots of creative ways that congregations are making that happen now. I know of congregations. I just talked with a pastor, actually also a member of the board, the other day, and they have an FM transmitter that they purchased at a Radio Shack kind of a situation that they've set up, and they have, at the start of the pandemic, they had people coming into the parking lot and sitting in their cars, tuning into the radio, and he was up on the porch of the church preaching and leading worship from there. Since that time, half of the congregation is still meeting in the parking lot because they're still very concerned about COVID. The other half is wanting to meet in the church. So he said, I have about 50 in the parking lot, 50 in the congregation. in the church, and I've got a couple tuning in via Zoom. And so, and I know lots of congregations are meeting different ways online, whether it's recorded service or live in terms of virtually. But I think what we're finding in terms of our own staff, I think that weekly check-in, just when we're able to see, even though it's not up close and personal, just to see each other's faces, has really been, for me personally, an uplifting an opportunity to see everybody gathered at one space. So.
And we did have a follow-up, I guess, to that. Would you consider indoor, in-person services and or church buildings essential?
Church buildings essential? No. I think the church is about the people. I mean, there are lots of different ways people have met over the centuries. And that is church. It's about the people. It's about the gathering of people, whether that's in a building, whether that's in somebody's living room, whether that's out around the campfire, whether that's in a parking lot, whether that's via Zoom, whether that's over the phone. Again, for me, it's about the gathering of people.
We had two follow-up questions about Brethren Press. Judy Stout from San Diego is interested if Brethren Press produces ebooks. And Linda Davis wants to know if Brethren Press actually owns and operates printing facilities, or does it simply serve as a publisher and then contract out the production services?
Well, regarding the ebooks, we've not had a major effort at ebooks just because of the expense of doing an ebook. There are a couple resources that have been done in that format, but that's one of the questions the reimagining group will be talking about in terms of reimagining Brethren Press. Is that really a direction we need to be moving more significantly? There is a mindset that we've got an older crowd that much prefers picking up an actual book. It's not always the case. My mother will sit and read books on an iPower for hours at a time. And so I prefer reading electronically as well. So right now, Brethren Press has not been doing that. It's something we're going to be looking at. Regarding actually owning and operating printing facilities, no, the presses were sold off years ago. And so, yes, we do simply publish, and we contract out the production of our resources.
And if I could jump in on the question of the electronic resources in connection with Brethren Press, providing curriculum, the SHINE curriculum for spiritual development, I know that they have begun to make some online resources available, which I think are different definition-wise from ebook, but yeah.
Yeah.
So they have definitely made some efforts and some progress in those directions.
And the Shine committee has been looking at and working at that electronic format of resources.
Yes.
Pretty intentionally now.
Yeah. And could I ask a question about God's racial justice, or should we stick on Brethren Press for a bit longer?
Hey, it's your time. I'm glad to talk about God's racial justice.
Okay, well, in the strategic plan, it really caught my attention. The portion on seek God's racial justice. In the San Diego church, we have had our book study group which has been totally Zooming, doing the White Fragility book. And now we are doing the How to Be an Anti-Racist, and finding those very challenging, very thought-provoking, very, I would say, unsettling in good ways. And I'm very happy to see the Seek God's Racial Justice on the list. And I'm wondering if there is a contact person or a contact group that is focusing on that for the denomination, or how would we connect with those efforts and move forward?
Well, Linda, in terms of the strategic plan, the board is just at the beginning of really
Gotcha.
understanding the plan. And so in terms of this specific background vision, there's nobody to really contact yet. However, we have an intercultural director, LaDonna Nkosi,
Yes.
and she would be delighted to talk with you at any point.
Wonderful. Great. Thank
And
you so much.
her contact information is on the website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brother.
Eric Brummett had his hand raised next, so let's turn to Eric.
Well, I see in the chat, I know Susan had a question, so I don't know if you want David to tackle that one first, or.
There have been a couple requests to talk about the Covenant Brethren Church. I thought maybe we'd give that a little bit more time. So if someone has maybe a shorter question for David before that.
Okay, yeah, because my question's related to that. My question is related to that too, so I'll wait till we get there.
Okay, that's great. Good to know. Just trying to monitor everyone's questions here. There was a question about what kind of conversation is happening regarding annual conference in 2021, and if there's a possibility that that might be virtual.
Yeah, the Program and Arrangements Committee is I'm not in that circle of conversation, only when I talk to Chris Douglas from time to time. So I don't know all the details, but I know that I think they're recognizing that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what next summer will bring. Of course, we're bound by convention center contracts and hotel contracts, which make these kind of things quite challenging. But I know they're in the process of really looking at really a hybrid model, both allowing in-person participation as well as joining in virtually. And that would, and I don't want to speak prematurely. I don't know all the details of that. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get myself in hot water for saying something that may not be true. So.
And we did have a question, David. Let me find it. One person asks, do I understand that giving to the Brethren homes during the pandemic is based on their percentage of donations to the denomination rather than need?
There is a Fellowship of Brethren Homes, and it's not based on their giving to the denomination. It's based on their size, and that size then is wrapped around, I believe, a due that they pay, and so we don't. How do I want to say this? We are a partner with the Fellowship of Brethren Homes. We don't staff it per se. They have a staff person that kind of coordinates their activities together. And so we worked with them, but it was, yes, a percentage based on the size of the retirement community. So it wasn't really what they were based on what they were paying in, so to speak.
Okay, then we had a couple questions, David, about the Covenant Brethren Church. Susan Boyer asks how many churches have split off with the Covenant Brethren Church. Someone wants to know your personal opinions or your personal thoughts on the Covenant Brethren Church. And then Eric, you had a question that you said was related to that as well.
Well, the question you just mentioned was my question too, so.
You mean my personal opinion about that? Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing like a wonderful, challenging question this evening. It's really, in terms of how many churches have withdrawn, split off, there's not a real clarity about that. We can identify churches that have withdrawn from the Church of the Brethren. And for example, what was printed in Newsline about Southeastern District the other week, there were 19 churches that withdrew. I know one of those churches was going to remain independent. The assumption is that the others are going with the Covenant Brethren Church. I did not watch the online first annual conference of the Covenant Brethren Church. But a couple of people who tuned in identified that they have identified, I forget what it was, a half dozen churches that now are officially recognized as Covenant Brethren. Maybe it was 8, I don't know the exact number. And so what they're doing is, from what I understand, is each church it's kind of a litmus test. They have to sign the covenant of the Covenant Brethren Church, which highlight, really, there are 2 things you have to commit to. The others are basically will work at this. And one is wrapped around homosexuality, and the other is wrapped around abortion. You have to commit to upholding both of those to be a part of the Covenant Brethren. And so there were those 19 churches from Southeastern. There have been another half dozen from Southeastern who have also since withdrawn. Again, I don't know their status of connecting with the Covenant Brethren or not. And there have been what's it been, about a half dozen churches in Atlantic Northeast District that have withdrawn. From what I understand, those churches are planning to remain independent. They're not planning to connect with the Covenant Brethren. That's what I've been told. There have been a couple of churches in Southern Ohio, Kentucky District, 3 or 4. Again, these are not exact numbers off the top of my head, that have withdrawn. Again, my understanding is that they're remaining independent, that they're not connecting to the Covenant Brethren. What's difficult to determine is we know that the Covenant Brethren leadership is moving around and engaging pastoral leadership and other congregations in conversations. But they're pretty cagey about what they share with who that is. And early on, they were saying, it's fearful of retribution, that pastors will be punished or whatever the case may be. And so that's been the frustration. That's been the frustration. I think the other frustration for me is the misinformation that's connected with those conversations. The misinformation and the misrepresentation of the Church of the Brethren. And I think what the moderator, the annual conference officers are doing right now is making themselves available to districts and really just having these kinds of conversations about what questions do you have, and trying to clear up any inaccurate information or misrepresentation along the way. I was a district executive for 11 years, working alongside 55 churches pretty closely. every one of those churches was different and unique. Not one of them alike, even though there might have been some theological differences. When it comes down to it, they were not alike. If you were to put two of those congregations together and said, you have to live together, we're merging you, if each of those would have been a congregation of 100 each, you would have ended up with a congregation probably about of 100 when it's all said and done, because there's a lot of other stuff that goes with a congregation. And so, I also know that there were congregations in the district that I served that were unhappy with the Church of the Brethren. And that goes back, one of those congregations didn't participate in district conference or annual conference since the 60s, since the Church of the Brethren made decisions around the National and World Council of Churches. And a couple of those congregations were only brethren in name. They weren't brethren theologically. They didn't really embrace our values. And so, I recognize that there will be churches along the way that just need to make those kind of decisions. And I'm really sad and sorry to see them go. But I also know that sometimes their values differ so greatly from what I understand as some of our core brethren values. And so I think that's part of it. I think I'm also really sad to see some congregations ripped apart by this, literally split in two, families divided, because there are some in leadership that want to withdraw from the Church of the Brethren, and there are others that don't want to go. And I'm actually working with a congregation right now that the congregation voted to withdraw, but there was a pretty significant remnant that didn't want to leave. And so, it's really unfortunate and sad to see that happen. And so, coming back to numbers, I don't have a real clear total count on how many have actually left for the Covenant Brethren. But as I've indicated, some have left and are planning to stay independent, and others will likely connect with Covenant Brethren, and there could be more, and that's what we're uncertain of. Personal feelings, I kind of hinted at that in some of what I shared already. We had, when we first heard that this group met to talk about, at that point they were not the Covenant Brethren, they were ABC, I forget what the acronym, Association of Brethren Churches or something, that they were looking at the possibility of providing, do we want to think about forming another denomination? And denominational leadership met with them, had conversation, and there was really a commitment to try and be in the up and up with one another. At one point we pushed pretty hard, I did, in one conversation, that it feels like you're really promoting out, really trying to encourage people to leave. And there was some denial connected to that. And one long-term Church of the Brethren leader just said point blank, he said, I disagree with my friends around the table. He said, I am out promoting. Just by virtue of us meeting, we're promoting. Just by virtue of us pulling together documentation, we're promoting. And he said, so that we're doing. But there was always the disconnect, because not everybody would make that same jump that he did. And so it was hard for me. I never felt like we were getting quite the whole story. And that, for me, that was unfortunate. And I'm sad to see churches split off, but I also recognize that when there are some instances that's maybe the most healthy thing that can happen. So does that answer the questions? Those two questions anyway? You want to push me a little bit more?
Well, as long as you're still talking about that, what kind of impact will the departures have, in your opinion, on the denomination?
You know, I think the question that question has been asked in different ways. I think, and I want to be careful how I say this. I think what we're seeing for the congregations who have withdrawn already, the financial impact of that has been, in one level, negligible, because these are congregations that could give into the denomination more recently or years ago. I think some of those recognizing in terms of our giving, in terms of we have our core ministries, our general fund ministries, so to speak, but we also have self-funding ministries like Brother and Disaster Ministries. And so some of these groups were giving designated gifts. And so that there will be some impact there. Obviously there is a membership impact, but I do wonder if it does open the door for us to have a different kind of conversation now in the life of the church. There are clearly people who continue to identify with the same concerns of these folks who have withdrawn. And I don't ever want to diminish that voice. I mean, I think we're a very diverse church. And I really hope that we can find ways to really open doors of conversation, conversations that we've not really been able to have very well these last couple of years. I think we need to talk about the tough issues before us. I think we also need to acknowledge, I think, which was the intent of the compelling vision, to recognize that we do have more in common with one another than what we will sometimes admit or own or recognize. And I would hope that the congregations would recognize that we have a lot in common. Yes, there are issues and some things we disagree with, but let's keep praying about that. Let's keep engaging in study with one another around the scriptures, trying to come to some clear understanding. If we open ourselves to the leading of the Holy Spirit, hopefully at some point we can get there.
David, Eric Brummett, pastor at Live
Yes,
Oak.
Eric.
Al's question kind of spurred mine on. So all of this, splitting and separating is happening simultaneously as we're trying to put together this compelling vision. What have you seen, or how have you seen the two impacting each other, and their interplay, and where they've intersected? And going forward, like next year's annual conference, when we come together and hopefully approve the compelling vision, I mean, what, if anything, will, how will the splitting, impact that then?
I led a number of conversations related to compelling vision. I led one at your district conference. I think my sense of those conversations and the conversation as a whole was really, I think it really did highlight some of the foundational pieces that we agree on in the life of the church across the theological spectrum. I think that there was an undercurrent that developed. I think when we in 2017, when we identified on stage that and made this suggestion to the delegate body to really identify a compelling vision for the church, I think we articulated pretty clearly, at least I thought we did, that we really wanted the vision not to focus on the issues that we were addressing, mainly issues around sexuality, but really try to identify a vision that that we could work at in common. That wasn't that we were sweeping issues under the rug, so to speak, but it was really about let's really work at this vision. Let's really have these conversations, engage one another around the tables. I mean, some of those conversations were just pretty incredible. Not everybody had quite the same experience, but coming out on this side, the idea was, now that we've got a compelling vision, maybe that gives us a different sense of who we are, and maybe it helps us have a different kind of conversation around these tough issues. I think that was really the intent, and has been the intent. It wasn't to ignore them, but we've been so hotly debating this for how long. Let's really change the conversation. And I think not doing business in an annual conference, I think gathering around tables and engaging that conversation showed us that we can meet and talk together and have very different points of view, but still have some common things. We still share things in common. So, but this undercurrent, when we weren't asking questions around sexuality and biblical authority, that some wanted us to be asking and addressing, that created an undercurrent. And I really don't think it distracted from our task. I really feel good about the work that we did in terms of compelling vision and where we come out. I think the real test, Eric, really does come at the annual conference with the approval of that. I mean, the board is given an example of how a board, our denominational board, will live out of that compelling vision. That will look different for each congregation. I mean, that's the hope, that each congregation will embrace this in some way and live out of the compelling vision. I think the other hope is in what the leadership team is beginning to have conversations around. How do we need to begin to change annual conference? And what we do at annual conference. We've had two conferences really centered around that looked different because we were talking with one another and not dealing with issues that divide us, so to speak. Is there a way that we can frame an annual conference in the future that we're doing more of that and less debating about issues that we're likely not going to agree on? So I don't know, Eric, if that gets to your question or not.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
David and friends, for the sake of time, we have one more question in the chat that I'd like David to address briefly, if that's possible. And then I want to be cognizant of our time as we transition to next insight sessions tonight. So that final question, David, is from Kim Boardman. And she said, could you address the shortage of brethren pastors and any strategies to find new leaders/pastors?
I think the Lilly grant that we received for the part-time pastor full-time ministry is an effort to really rethink what does it mean to be recognized that more and more of our pastors are bivocational, and it's really, I believe, again, coming out of my prior responsibilities as a district executive and working alongside churches, I think it's reframing some of our understanding of what a pastor looks like. I think more and more, our pastors are going to need to be bivocational. They're going to be multiple. Dare I say it? Do we need to re-embrace some of our free ministry tradition? Not free in terms of whether we pay them or not, but where we have we call out multiple leaders in the life of the church, wrapped around their gifts. One of those people may be our preacher. or preachers, and some of those may be strictly pastoral care, maybe some of the, and we're doing some of that already, but I think that's going to have to become more and more of our strategy. And is there any strategy in place, or are they working at that? Not quite this intentionally, but I think that's really some of the conversations that the Office of Ministry has been working at, kind of behind the scenes.
Does that answer your question, Kim? I see
I'm
you
trying to
nodding.
find Kim on the screen. Oh, there she is.
Great. Well, we are coming to the close of our time together. And I just want to thank David so much for your time this evening. Will you join me in thanking him, either with a clap or a reaction emoji? I do want to remind all of our attendees that when you leave this insight session tonight, in a few minutes, you will receive an email with an evaluation. If we were meeting in person, you would receive an evaluation as you walked out the door that could help our planners for next year. But this year it is online. It'll be a link in your email. So please keep an eye out on that and try to fill that out within the next 24 hours while this is still fresh in your mind. Thank you, David, for your time this evening.
My pleasure. It was good to be with you all this evening. I so wish that I would have been able to travel to California and be with you in person, and I'm sure we all wish that. But please be well, take care of yourselves, and I will continue to hold each of you and your congregations in your leadership in prayer. Thank you all.
And we hold you in prayer as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Off to your next insight session at 7 o'clock.
Good night.
Good night.